Here's something to ponder. The most powerful force shaping our daily life isn't the law, the government, or even technology. It's simply what's in your wallet. Every bill, every coin, every swipe that you make, it traces a web of power that stretches halfway around the world. For nearly 80 years, the American dollar has quietly ruled this invisible empire. It shaped economies, written and rewritten destinies, started and ended wars, without a single shot ever being fired. But what happens if the rest of the world one day wakes up and says, we don't want to play by those rules anymore? And what if the spark that ignites that revolution isn't a war, but a tweet sent in the middle of the night? Welcome to another episode of Money with Elever. Let's start with a question almost nobody asks. What really is a global reserve currency? There is no official decree, no king crowned, no ceremony that is televised. Yet, by silent agreement, the world tends to pick one currency, holds it, uses it, and trusts it as the ultimate safe bet in uncertain times. Central banks stockpile it, traders swap it at every border, and governments settle their biggest bills with it. But why? What is or what makes a global currency really tick? The thing is, when different nations need to pay for trade, say oil from Saudi Arabia, microchips from Taiwan, it's easier to use a currency that everyone else will accept. The reserve currency then becomes the default denominator for deals, debts, and dreams from Lagos to London. Now, for a country whose money is chosen, the benefits are enormous. It can borrow more cheaply, wield its power through sanctions and incentives, and shape global markets to its liking. But for everyone else, it means surrendering a bit of financial independence, and sometimes a lot more than that. To understand how a currency actually becomes global, let's go back centuries before the Wall Street ticker. Picture this. It's 1600s and the Amsterdam canals teem with ships from every continent. Dutch merchants build colonies far and wide. And to help with the cause, the Bank of Amsterdam invents a new way to hold and transfer money. Secure, reliable, and accepted everywhere the Dutch ships sail. And it works. Being the biggest economic powerhouse of its day, their currency, the Dutch guilder, quickly becomes the passport for world trade. The Dutch guilder's magic wasn't just about strong trade. It was about trust. That it is backed by a system that kept coins stable and debasement both in check. The guilder's dominance reflected not just the Dutch ships and the soldiers, but something far rarer. Faith in the system that actually stood behind it. And that really is the true underpinning that makes a world currency. In essence, it isn't the currency itself, but the unshakable trust in the system that backs it. However, as the Dutch power declined, the world started looking elsewhere. Again, simply because it could no longer depend on the Dutch system to safely guarantee the guilder's standing. In effect, the faith was shaken, the trust was broken. Enter the British pound sterling. By the 1800s, the sun famously never set on the British Empire. Everywhere its navy sailed, the British coins followed. London replaced Amsterdam as the clearinghouse for global trade. Whether you wanted Indian cotton, or Caribbean sugar, or Canadian wheat, you often paid, directly or not, in British pounds. This hold lasted for over a century. But the tides of history changed again. By the 1940s, Britain, drained by two devastating world wars, had amassed enormous debts and had already spent its reserves. Its factories needed rebuilding, its navy already rusted. The pound's crown began to slip, quietly at first, and then dramatically. Across the Atlantic, however, the US was untouched by the physical devastation of war. And by then, already an economic powerhouse, dollars began flooding the world through aid, loans, and trade deals. And then in 1944, 44 nations gathered in Bretton Woods, New Hampshire, to formalize a new financial order, the Bretton Woods Agreement. It made the dollar the world's anchor, every currency pegged officially or not to the dollar, and the dollar convertible to the gold at $35 an ounce. For decades, dollar's role was gospel, cemented by American prosperity, military might, and crucially, trust. Even after America stopped allowing foreign banks to redeem dollars for gold in 1971, the system didn't change much. The dollar stayed at the center not because anyone forced it, but because no better alternative existed. Today, over half of global reserves are still in the US dollar. But this privilege isn't just ceremonial. Like we mentioned, the United States can borrow more cheaply because of this. It can export more and punish its foes simply by restricting access to the dollar-based system. Yet, every superpower creates resentment in its wake. Whether fleets or banknotes are the weapon, it doesn't matter. For decades, nations crumbled but played along. They knew the risks involved in challenging the king of currencies. But before we dive deep into the dollar debate, there is one question that we need to answer. Who exactly is or could challenge the dollar's throne? That's when you'll often hear the group's name thrown about, and that is BRICS. BRICS, that's Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. But who are they really? And why are they suddenly thrown into the center of global attention? Well, here's the statistics that might shock you. These countries, put together, control almost 40% of the entire world's economy, measured by purchasing power parity. That's nearly twice the size of the United States, which accounts for roughly 18%. They have combined populations exceeding 3 billion, vast natural resources, booming industries, and growing political clout. Imagine that. Almost half of the world's GDP and population concentrated in this bloc. Then came April 2025, a year when simmering frustrations turned into an open economic brawl. The US slapped a 25% tariff on the $34 billion worth of Chinese goods, a move China instantly matched. This was not a Twitter storm, it was the first shot fired in the opening of a global war, not a military one this time, but a trade. Over months, these tariffs escalated, hitting sectors from electronics to textiles, striking hundreds of billions in goods. And the ripple was felt globally, from warehouses in Guangzhou to factories in Michigan. Supply chains reworked, prices shifted. Other BRICS countries weren't spared either. Brazil, India, Russia all felt the heat as tariffs hit steel, aluminum, and agricultural exports. Suddenly, the economic landscape was littered with barriers. This wasn't just a negotiation, it was a signal that America was ready to use its economic weight to enforce its will. And the message to the BRICS was loud and clear. Your dependence on the dollar is your biggest weakness. I dare you. But toppling an empire, especially one built on trust, habit, and the world's deepest and fastest financial markets, is a Herculean task, to say the least. Central banks hold dollars for a reason: stability, safety, and liquidity. But the biggest problem, there is no easy substitute. The Chinese yuan is tightly managed by Beijing, the Indian rupee not fully convertible, and the euro is hobbled by regional differences. Even BRICS officials joke about what a chaos common currency could actually bring. Still, the story isn't over. The world today is more fractured than it has ever been in decades. Conflicts simmer or burn in Ukraine, Gaza, the Indo-Pak border, and the global tariff war unleashed by Trump. Amid this turmoil, imagine a bold new twist in the currency story. What if BRICS teamed up and expanded the alliance of countries, deciding to launch a brand new global currency designed to challenge or even replace the US dollar? Let's unpack what this really means, because it's much more than just issuing a new kind of money. At the macro level, such a move would shake the very foundations of international trade and finance. Governments around the world would no longer use dollars to pay for oil, food, or technology. This, in turn, could undermine US's ability to impose sanctions or borrow cheaply. Countries caught in America's crosshairs might find new room to maneuver economically, free from the dollar's chokehold. Global trade could become less dollar dependent, potentially lowering transaction costs amongst BRICS and allied countries. They might encourage more investment and infrastructure development across Asia, Africa, and Latin America, in turn fueling growth. But here's the thing, even in such a rosy scenario, it won't be all peaches. Here's what might change in your wallet and daily life though. Gas prices could become less predictable. If oil trades in the new currency fluctuates in the global market value, it could lead to sharper swings at the pump for the consumers worldwide. Inflation could become more volatile in some countries, especially during the transition. Currency fluctuations might make imports more expensive or cheaper in unpredictable ways. Sending money across borders or buying imported goods might become more complex for a while, depending on how quickly the new payment system and banking infrastructures evolve. However, all of this misses one crucial point. A single new currency for all BRICS sounds like a neat solution, but it comes with massive challenges. For starters, BRICS is not one country, and like any group of 4 or 5 different nations, there are huge political, social, and economic differences. China's economy centers on exports and industry. India's relies heavily on services. Russia and Brazil's fortune rise and fall with oil and commodities. South Africa faces a unique social challenge. Aligning these diverse interests into one unified monetary policy, which essentially is the requirement for any single currency, is almost impossible. Remember the Eurozone? Even among much smaller, much more integrated European countries, political discord and economic divergence create constant stress on the currency union. These same issues, plus a greater variety of political systems and priorities, makes BRICS single currency a distant and even risky prospect. Questions like who leads this currency? How are the policies decided? How do you handle conflict? These will never have any easy answer. Not to mention the countries themselves have military flashpoints, such as India and China. Because of all of this, many experts believe that the future might not be a single BRICS currency at all. Instead, what could emerge is a multipolar currency system, where several major currencies coexist, share influence, and compete. Well, this does have upsides. Stability through diversification, more choices for governments and businesses to manage risks, a better reflection of global economic reality. However, it also means more complexity of international trade and finance, greater volatility and currency fluctuations, and of course the risk of currency wars. And in such a scenario, the US dollar, in irony of all ironies, will likely emerge again as the clear first among equals, defeating the entire point of the exercise to begin with. So let's put it all together and try and distill the final meaning of all of it, shall we? The story of global money isn't just about economic theory. It is about trust. It is about power. It is about the invisible architecture that holds or reshapes civilization. When a currency becomes the world's reserve, it is not out of convenience. It's a mechanism of trust. It is embedded in decades and centuries of economic performance, political outcomes, institutional strength, and yes, military power. Trust that you can lend or borrow this currency, and trust that the government will honor their debts. Trust that the markets will not collapse overnight. This trust acts like a glue holding the global markets together, and when that trust weakens or is challenged, it doesn't just rattle banks or trades. It shakes the foundations of international cooperation, trade flows, and even diplomatic relations. But controlling money is perilous. It's dangerous. History tells us that empires, no matter how powerful, eventually face rivals who question their legitimacy, their fairness, and simply their survival. The single currency warmongering today is a manifestation of the age-old phenomena, a fight for global order. This matters deeply for every person because money is the heartbeat of trust in society. When it falters, the shockwaves ripple through jobs, prices, savings, and peace, things that affect you and I in a direct way. The silent currency war is very real, and the stakes could not be higher. Thank you for watching Money with Elever. I'm Santosh, one of the co-founders of Elever. We are India's only 100% factor-based and quant-driven PMS. To know more about us, check out the link in the description. And once again, I'll see you soon in the next episode.